Hello, welcome everyone. My name is John Jeha. I'm an immigration attorney at Hiscock Legal Aid. I've been practicing immigration law for about 5-6 years now, and it's my pleasure today to talk to you guys about an important subject, which is how to become a U.S. citizen and the process of undergoing naturalization here in the U.S. And I'm going to share the screen, do screen 2, and yeah, perfect. Okay, so how to undergo naturalization in the United States. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of gaining U.S. citizenship. What can a U.S. citizen do that other people cannot? First, maybe the most important thing that a U.S. citizen can do is they have the right to vote in U.S. State, federal, and local elections, including the President of the United States. The second thing they can do is get a U.S. passport, which allows them to travel all around the world, certain countries visa-free, which is quite nice. U.S. citizens can apply for government jobs, certain government jobs that are not open to non-citizens, so that's a definite plus. They can bring their members from overseas. They can petition for them to come join them in the U.S., initially as lawful permanent residents, and then also as U.S. citizens eventually. And they can do this at certain times faster than green card holders potentially. They are allowed to get certain benefits that non-U.S. citizens perhaps they wouldn't be allowed to get. For example, in the state of New York State benefits are only available to green card holders for a period of 5 years, whereas if you become a U.S. citizen, you are then eligible to gain those benefits, for as long as you are financially or economically eligible for them. And then lastly, you cannot be deported. After you become a U.S. citizen, you are considered a citizen of the United States, and you're not from another country, and therefore the government is not going to kick you out and send you back to a different country. So who's eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship? You have to be 18 years old. Again, this is in reference to the application itself. In some situations, children of parent lawful permanent residents who apply for citizenship may also automatically acquire citizenship. This is not always the case, but sometimes it is. But in general, in order to file the application, one has to be above the age of 18 years old, 18 or above. Also, you have to have been a lawful permanent resident of the United States for at least 5 years. There is an exception in some situations. You only have to be a lawful permanent resident for 3 years. We'll talk about that in a second. But in general, you have to have been a lawful permanent resident or a green card holder for at least 5 years. You have to be able to speak, read, and write English. And you also have to be able to pass a civics exam on U.S. history and government. There are some exceptions to this, which we'll discuss in a minute. But in general, you have to be able to know English, and you have to know about U.S. history and government. You also have to have good moral character. That's a concept we'll talk about next. What is good moral character? But the idea here is that the U.S. government wants to let people who have a good character to become members of the American population and society. And the idea here is they want people with good character. And lastly, you have to be able to take an oath of allegiance, which are going to pledge your loyalty to the U.S. and also, kind of erase the bonds that you've had to your previous country. And so people have to be prepared to do that, and that's something to keep in mind as one applies for U.S. citizenship. So good moral character, what is it? Good moral character really comes down to being a good person. Things that identify you as not a good person or a person who doesn't have a good character would disqualify you from acquiring good moral character, or they would negate your good moral character. So, for example, if you have a criminal history, that might negate your good moral character. An occasional, like a speeding ticket or something small like that, doesn't necessarily hurt your good moral character. Maybe if you had 15 speeding tickets, but a speeding ticket or two are not going to hurt your good moral character. And but if you do have a consistent criminal history, then that would definitely cause some problems with good moral character. Also, drugs and alcohol speak to good moral character quite a bit under USCIS's definition of good moral character. So you don't want to have a record, even if it's a minor crime, for example, a small amount of marijuana or something, which might be a very petty crime in a state, or it might be an issue, not even an issue, like in the state of New York where marijuana is legal. But if you if you do have a history with drugs and USCIS know about it somehow, it can hurt your good moral character. Also, alcoholic problems with alcohol, for example, DUIs. If you have a DUI, that can hurt you not just on the criminal side of things, because a DUI is a crime, but also it does indicate that you do have alcohol issues, and so it's not good for your good moral character. And fraud issues are quite a large deal. Fraud immediately negates good moral character. So you want to, USCIS want people who are honest to gain naturalization. So it's important to always present authentic documents to USCIS. It's always important to keep in mind that you want to tell the truth to all all government officials. So what are the exemptions to some of these requirements? Well, the first one is if you married a U.S. citizen and that's how you got your lawful permanent resident status, then you only have to wait 3 years. You only have to have been a green card holder for 3 years before you can apply to gain U.S. citizenship. The second is the next 3 years talk about the duration of how long you have to have been a lawful permanent resident and lived in the United States in order to get around the English exam that you have to take as a lawful as a candidate for naturalization. So the first one is if you are 50 years old and you've lived in the U.S. for at least 20 years, then you can have the English requirement waived. You still have to take the civics exam, but the civics exam will take place in the language that you're comfortable with. The second one, if you're 55 years or older and you've lived in the United States for at least 15 years, then you can waive the English exam as well. There's just 5 years higher on how long you've lived in the U.S., 5 years less for how long you've been a permanent resident. And then lastly, if you're 65 years or older, you're eligible for a shorter civics test. They won't ask 10 questions. I believe they'll ask 6 or 7. I'm not 100% sure. And then the medical disability. So if you do have a medical disability that speaks to your inability that prevents you from learning English, a medical disability that prevents you from learning English, then you can waive both the civics and the English requirement. The medical disability in question, though, has to prevent you from actually being able to learn English. If you have a broken leg or a broken arm, it might be a disability, but it doesn't speak to your ability to learn English. So, cognitive issues, for example, would prevent you from learning English, and that, for example, would be something that could get you the medical disability. The way that it works is that there's a certain form called an N648 that must be filled out by a physician, and a physician who you have a history with, and that physician must fill out the form and sign it and explain in great detail why you are unable to learn English. So it's not something that everyone is eligible for. It's something quite specific. So the citizenship process, how does it work? You fill out a form called an N400. It's a relatively short form. It's about 12 pages, and you fill it out and you send it off to USCIS. If USCIS accepts the form, then the first part will be to do a biometrics review. You go to the USCIS office. You'll be sent an appointment date and a time to show up at the USCIS office. You'll go down there. They'll take your fingers and they'll take pictures of you, and that part will be done. Then you'll go to the interview, where you will do the first part where you'll review the application. We'll talk about them when you do the exams. And if that goes well, then you'll do a ceremony and you'll get to be sworn in as a U.S. citizen. You'll take an oath of allegiance, and you won't be sworn in, but you'll take an oath of allegiance that will allow you to become a U.S. citizen. And it's a beautiful ceremony for citizens and non-citizens alike. I recommend that everyone gets a chance to go to a naturalization ceremony, because they are quite moving and they're wonderful processes, wonderful events. So what's the cost? The cost has gone up since this presentation was made. They went up in April. I should have changed this. I apologize. They went up in April, and I think they're about $775 or $725 if you file your application online. It's nice that USCIS are allowing people to file applications online now, because it is faster and more streamlined, and $50 cheaper. And also, if you do, there are certain circumstances that you can receive a fee waiver, which means you don't have to pay any money, which is quite nice. I would speak to a immigration lawyer who knows the ins and outs of that. There are a few ways you can do it. You would be eligible for it. You also need 2 passport style photos. Those are the small photos that you get, at the post office or Walmart or Walgreens that are 2 inches by 2 inches. They'll need a copy of your green card to go along with your application. And you'll also need copies of any other documents. For example, if you have a criminal record that you're trying to negate, you'll need a copy of your criminal records and whatnot. So what happens at the interview? So the first step in the interview is to review the application. Make sure everything in the application is correct, looks good, nothing needs any corrections or whatnot. They'll review your address, your name, your birthday, your travel history, that kind of thing. Then they'll move on to the English exam, which they'll converse with you in English. Then they'll do a reading, writing, and U.S. history test. And we'll talk about those: reading, writing, and U.S. history. And here we'll talk a little bit about that now. The reading and the writing. So the reading and the writing, usually you'll walk into the interview room. Officer has a small office with a desk. You'll sit opposite him. He'll be behind the desk. And on your side of the desk, there'll be an iPad or a tablet of some kind. And you'll be asked, and when you get to this portion of the interview process, you'll be asked to do the reading test. The reading test will just have 3 or 4 sentences pop up on prompt up on the tablet. You'll be asked to read them, and that's it. Takes 90 seconds, nothing too long. Then the writing exam, what will happen is there will be a line on the tablet. You'll be given a stylus that will allow you to write on the tablet, and the officer will ask you to write the sentences that he speaks out loud. And he says he says 3 sentences. He or she, excuse me. The officer will ask 3 questions, and you only need to write 1 correctly to pass, so it's not too hard. And then the civics test. The civics test covers about 100 questions. So there's a pool of 100 questions that the officer can ask from, and they don't go outside the 100 questions. So they also ask only 10 questions. So if you theoretically memorize all 100 questions, you can walk into the exam and pass, no problem. I once had a client who did not study in-depth American history, government, or politics, and she just memorized the 100 questions, and she passed with flying colors. She got asked 6 questions, and she knew all 6, and she answered them immediately, and she did very well in the exam. But I'm sure if you had asked her a question from outside the pool of 100 questions, she would have had no idea what you were talking about. But I mean, that is one way to pass. And you do naturally learn plenty of American history, politics, and governance through the 100 questions. So you only need to answer 6 correctly. So if you answer the first 6 correctly, you're done and you've passed. If you do pass, you'll be told the interview you passed. You don't have to wait. You'll know immediately. And you'll be scheduled for your ceremony. During COVID, they weren't doing ceremonies and they were swearing people in right on the spot. However, now they're reverting back to doing proper citizenship ceremonies, which is good because they're quite wonderful and they're nice to have back. And it's exciting and emotionally very moving to attend a ceremony. And if you fail, you'll be scheduled for another interview. You can go back. You can focus on your weaknesses, perhaps come back stronger, and get it again. And if you fail the second time, then you need to reapply. And I think you can do that up to 3 times. So you can, and each time you have 2 shots. So you got plenty of times to go for naturalization. And we encourage all of our clients to do their best and to file for naturalization. And I think that's the end of the presentation. If anyone has any questions, they can always reach out to me. My name is John Jeha, and thank you very much for listening. Stop sharing. And then